Draft the way the game was meant to be played. We come through here swinging with big punches, much like UFC 300. Oh my goodness. Today, of course, is no different than any other day. If you're watching over on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel and you have not already, you need to hit the button, ring the bell, leave a comment, do all the things that help us move further on this algorithm so we can continue doing shows like this one. I, of course, am your host with the most time on his hands. I am Thomas Silver. You can find me at @LNostratomus. My fun fact of the day is, in one of the few matches me and my brother ever wrestled against each other, commentary was done to the promoter by none other than the Honky Tonk Man. And when we went backstage, he looked at us in the face and said, the next time he tells you to go 10 minutes, tell him off and go 20.
That's fun. I'm Jacob Sanderson. My fun fact, this requires somewhat of a backstory. Tom's the only one here that's met my mom, but my mom is
lovely lady.
Was like one of those like charmingly crazy people. In the sense she's like a little bit paranoid about, microwaves, and a little bit paranoid about what people are. When I first got Facebook, which was about 5 years after everyone else got Facebook, I had inherited that paranoia. So I decided I can't let people know my real birthday. So my fake birthday when I first got Facebook was April 16th. And I didn't change it for like years. And so every year on April 16th, I would get a bunch of fraudulent happy birthday messages from people who didn't know me and didn't know when my real birthday was, but were friends with me on Facebook. And so I just want to wish a happy second birthday to myself.
Oh my God.
Savvy.
Amazing.
That's pretty good. That's hard top. I'm Luke Gilbert. You can find me on X at LGilbertFF. And it's more of just a fun take, but there's been a lot of coach movement in college basketball. It's been very fun to follow. But John Calipari, the coach of the Kentucky Wildcats for the last 15 years, is now at Arkansas, and he's wearing red. And there's just some people who shouldn't wear red. It is very much a shock to the system to see that.
John Calipari looks like crap in red.
I don't know if it just doesn't suit him or if it's just completely different than seeing the blue. And I'm so used to hating him in the blue, going from Memphis whenever Tennessee beat Memphis to become #1 for the first time, which was very fun. Then him going to Kentucky where Tennessee has owned them the last couple of years. I've just been used to seeing him lose in blue, and now I'm going to have to get used to it in red. So that's going to be really fun. And the new coach entrance for Kentucky, that was something to watch. I don't know if I should feel embarrassed for Kentucky fans or if it was actually like a hype, but I don't know. It's been fun.
Today on college basketball today.
I just, out of curiosity, I just pulled up a photo of John Calipari wearing an extremely baggy 90s red jacket when he coached at UMass. So he's going back to his roots.
And yeah, that's been a while.
Oh
My
goodness.
Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
And of course, our guest of the evening joining us today.
Yeah. I am Danny Kelly. You can find me on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly. I refuse to say X.
Thank you.
I'll stick with the weird coaching vibes theme that we're talking about here. The Washington Huskies, who famously lost in the national title game last year, have now hosted Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll to their practices, which is just the weirdest, most surreal, the Matrix is tweaking out type of deal I've ever seen in my life. I saw Bill Belichick wearing a bunch of UW Husky gear. So anyways, that is a weird fact that I just saw today, and I don't like it. It makes me feel gross.
Shout out to him for carrying on the hoodie tradition, though. I mean, could you expect anything less?
It's just bizarre. I don't get it.
That looks photoshopped. I didn't like it.
AI is taking over the college coaching media.
Weird hand, like the AI just didn't quite work right.
Nah, it's AI and fake because he wouldn't be wearing a hoodie. I think that's the day we'll know that it was AI. Look, I mentioned at the top of this here program, rookie drafts deserve to be done before the NFL draft. And some people don't like this, they don't agree with this, and they're entitled to their wrong opinion. But on this show, we're going to hit it. First, what we're going to do is we've done our intros, we've been talking and talking and talking. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to try to dissect the brain that is Danny Kelly and why he decides to do these drafts so early. We love it. Sit tight. Back 5 seconds. Okay, Mr. Kelly, please get people on the right track with us. We have talked about this a couple of times this offseason. We are met with disgust. How could you possibly? You need the most information. Why do you, in these leagues, do it before the NFL draft?
Well, I'm not the commissioner of these leagues, for the record. I kind of just got on that train and decided to keep going with it. But I will say it makes things way, way more difficult and more challenging. I think that's kind of a fun part of it. It's like there's a whole nother layer to doing pre-draft rookie drafts, and that is doing your best. And I think the most important thing, well, not the most important thing, but one of the most important things is trying to figure out where guys are going to go in the draft. I think that's really fun. And I think that gives me a very slight edge, maybe over some of my competition. Obviously the industry is extremely sharp, but obviously you want to pick the good players, but it helps to pick the players that are going to be taken earlier. Generally, they have longer runway, they have more opportunities, all that stuff that you guys are well aware of. I just think doing pre-draft rookie drafts is fun because you have to be able to guess and predict where players are going to go, which guys are going to be day 2 picks and which guys are going to be day 3 picks, and then probably never do anything for your team.
I think what makes it the most fun for me is that it becomes very dynamic. Like one of the things that I try to do is if I can't get my rookie drafts before the NFL draft, then I want them like in August, because the worst time for me, or literally the day after the draft. But every year it feels like the fun part of the rookie draft is the unknown, and it feels like this blank canvas where you can trade up and down the board and try to bend the board to your will and get the guys you want. And after a week or so, especially because just the way the dynasty community works is you probably end up in a lot of leagues with a lot of the same people that you're, it's like you're going into the country club and you're like, oh, you're the foursome ahead of us today, Paul. Yeah. And you kind of know everybody's guys are, and you get these tiers that become very, very solidified where you kind of know, okay, this is where you want to trade out of, this is where you want to trade into. And it becomes difficult to maneuver, and it becomes kind of boring because every rookie draft effectively becomes somewhat the same. Whereas pre-NFL draft, you just don't really know everybody's feeling. You don't really know where the tiers are and the tiers aren't. You don't know who the landmine is congrats, you just spent 205 on a 6th round pick. You don't know who the gem is. Actually, congrats, you just spent the 403 on a 2nd round pick. It just makes for a more dynamic experience, and it's fun to root during the draft, right? Like that's why it's probably the biggest reason that I enjoy playing Devy is when I get to watch the NFL draft and like fist pump when some guy goes in the 2nd round that I already have exposure to. Like last year, for instance, Devon Achane was like a guy who I was preaching the good word of all throughout the pre-draft period, and Kincaid as well. They both get these really lucky draft capital landing spot combinations, but outside of like a couple of Devy shares of Achane, it's like I didn't really feel like I got any reward for this, because it's like, oh great, like now they're really expensive and like there's no edge to being right on them anymore. I don't even know how much I could take. So it's fun to have already have some skin in the game. Oh,
that's a great point. The live draft, like updating your rosters and looking at your team and being like, oh hell yeah. Like just this is one example, but I remember I got Luke Musgrave in like the middle of the 4th round a bunch last year. People were for some reason just really out on him prior to the draft, and then he lands in the 2nd round with the Packers. We'll see if he ends up panning out. Obviously, I think he looked pretty good, but Tucker Kraft is still there, and there's a lot of competition for targets. But still, I think that kind of stuff, those kind of victories are super fun during the draft.
Absolutely.
And I think a fun thing, at least spending so much time looking at these prospects through a Devy lens. We're looking at this year, so I can only think about this year. I've already forgotten about last year's drafts. But for this year, there's so many players that I feel like are all, like you can argue are all in the same tier. which makes all of these, before you get the NFL's input on how they value them, it makes it so much more fun to try to maneuver and see where you're comfortable taking. I don't think you really necessarily even have to move up right now too, which makes it more fun to start moving down, trying to stockpile picks up. I don't know. You can probably go even into the 20s and 30s right now of where you're stockpiling picks and just get the players that you like. You don't have any guilt behind it either. You don't have to go, well, the NFL really hates, I don't know, Malachi Corley, but I love him, so I still want to take him higher than he probably should go. You can take him right now and have no guilt in that. And that's nice whenever you draft privately based off of those sort of instant reactions, your take lock from watching film on them for however many years they've been in college. It just makes me feel a little bit better inside until the NFL wrecks it later, but that's fine.
Well, this will be the theme of the episode for me when we talk about some of these round 2 guys, but like nothing gives me more like personal spiteful joy than drafting in like a rookie draft full of spreadsheet lovers, myself included. And just watching someone take like Sean Tucker at the 203 and being like, you're going to hate yourself in a month. Like you and just scooping up the like 10% of closing line value on like 3rd round Ricky Pearsall or whatever. It really just brings a tear to my eye.
Well, and I think you have to have, right. I think you have to have kind of the stones for it. You know what I mean? Because you could be the Malik Willis person. You could be the Malik Willis 101 person, right? Or someone who trades like a high-end quarterback. Seen this. Someone trades a high-end quarterback for Malik Willis, and then Malik Willis turns out to be nothing, and that player never recovers. That's a miserable situation. That is the fastest way to have like life's gotten hectic, have to leave.
That's how you create. Yeah. That's how you create. I'm cutting down on my leagues. Yeah.
That's the orphan pick, right? But as long as the rest of the league is comfortable with that, I think it is fine. But if I'm playing the devil's advocate, I understand why people might not want to introduce that level of just horrendousness into their league. I get it. I agree though. I'm with the fun. I'm with the like, I'm going to set this pick on fire like we're just burning money on Capitol Hill. Like I'm ready to do that for sure. It's entirely more fun. That was awesome. I love that. A lot of different opinions on doing a rookie. We have one full tilt league before we rolled over into Dynasty Points, where we have the Fantasy Points listener leagues. We still have the full tilt leagues that are still alive and very well. We have a draft in 2 days. It is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited to do it and mortified because I have the 108 and I have no idea what I'm going to do. So I'm going to use Danny Kelly to cement my pick. That way I can push the blame off.
Okay.
For if it doesn't work out, and then take all the credit if it does work. Because Danny, that's how it works in this business, as you know.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna take another quick break. When we come back, we are gonna hit some of these drafts and some of the things that you have seen. I know you and I have been talking DMs and such. We'll go over that with the people at the other side of this break. Okay, we were talking leading up to this show a little bit about how, and like Jacob said, we want to get the wide receivers not out of the top 3. But I want to lead in with this. We were talking about how usually we can rely on analytical profiles or something that's super concrete to make some of these wishy-washy picks instead of insert wide receiver that goes to the Bills at 108, insert Bo Nix or Penix if they get taken in the first round, and then whatever running back goes to Dallas. Like, that's your first 10 picks. Normally we could target, oh, this guy's got a phenomenal analytical profile. We can definitely feel good about him at the 203. Nah. Because if you listen to Scott Barrett and his analytics versus film debates with Brett Whitefield, film guys say this is the best, most deepest wide receiver class there is. And to take it right from Scott, this is the worst analytical profile wide receiver class that we might have ever seen. So how are you handling the tough decisions? And then do you have a lockdown of your wide receivers past 1, 2, and 3?
I don't have like a very really strong, I think, ranking. Right now for me, my 104 or my fourth receiver would probably be Lad McConkey. It comes down to him or Brian Thomas. I think, Brian Thomas is probably going to go top 15. So it's hard to sort of ignore that. Well, I don't know, top 20 at least. Based on everything that I've been
over
heard.
under for the people.
Yeah.
At home.
I mean, I think like there's a chance we see a team like the Bills trade up for him. There's plenty of teams in that range that could take him.
At 15, Jacksonville at 17 are both very possible.
And then since he's in there, it wouldn't be too surprising to see them kind of
team.
invest in a guy and then move on from T. Higgins. So I think the league likes Brian Thomas. I like Brian Thomas in theory, but again, this is the class where there's just a bunch of extremely scary analytical profiles attached to guys whose tape is pretty exciting. So, obviously Brian Thomas and A.D. Mitchell are the two guys for me that I think the biggest boomer bust players I've maybe looked at in the last like 5 or 6 years, players that I like A.D. Mitchell a lot. When I watched him, I was like, this guy's awesome. This was before I sort of dug into the analytical profile. Just like my first impression was this guy moves different. He's extremely explosive, extremely twitchy, catches everything. And why are people not talking about him as a first rounder? And then lo and behold, he is now talked about as like a probable first rounder. And unfortunately, he is the most bottom left quadrant receiver I've ever seen in my life in terms of like every graph or, every graph or table that you see is literally like last. He's the worst guy you could imagine being on pretty much everything I've ever seen. So that's scary. So I really don't know what to do with those guys. Again, it's just, you kind of have to take a leap of faith or just take a running back, take one of Trey Benson or Jonathan Brooks at that spot. I've seen a lot of JJ McCarthy going at 108, which makes sense because he's probably going to be a top 15 pick.
I don't think he'll be 108 for long, honestly.
Yeah. And so I've had a couple 108s. I've taken McCarthy a couple times. I'd be willing to take Brian Thomas there and just kind of hope it works out, but I'd be scared about it. And then if I had my preference, I'd probably take Lad McConkey there just because I think even though his profile isn't awesome either, I can picture him being a high volume target in the NFL.
Well, I'll make the case for McConkey. But just so I don't get caught in a Javonte Williams situation from last week.
That's right, you liar.
For the record, I went and traded for Javonte Williams in 2 leagues after that episode. So I backed myself up. But
just making up for being an absolute fraud live on air.
The backstory for this, Danny, is that I caped hard for Javonte Williams.
Nice.
Being talked about too meanly, mostly by Tom. And then realized that 2 of the 3 players that I said he should be ranked above are actually ranked above him in my own rankings. So that was the problem. So then I had to.
Sometimes you need to gut check. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
that happens.
I had to make a change. I had to be the change I wanted to see in the rankings. But anyway. So Lad McConkey, I should note, is not currently my wide receiver 4, although the gap has been closing and it might end up there post-draft, mostly just because I'm a little bit less secured in his round 1 capital than some of the other guys. But I think I'm getting there. I've been going through, kind of like we mentioned pre-show, somewhat of an existential crisis with respect to wide receiver prospecting. Yeah. Because back in the day, we talked about this with Scott. It used to be like ADP is more or less aligned with draft capital and landing spot.
Yeah. And
the way, that we can beat draft capital and especially beat landing spot, and effectively what the whole point of our dumb game in podcast is, beat ADP, is, for the most part, let's go sort by yards per team pass attempts and ideally age adjust that. And we'll have a discernible edge that isn't going to hit every single time, but on aggregate is going to be directionally accurate. And I've seen a lot of people say that like all this stuff is, bunk now, or it doesn't matter anymore. I don't agree with that take. I think that most of these analytical signals are actually getting better and better every year. The problem is that the market is becoming so much more aware of them. And there are so many more spreadsheet people in your leagues than there are pure film grinders in your leagues, that like no longer is draft capital and landing spot just determining ADP. It's it's all these models are all of a sudden determining ADP, right? It's like it's the JJ Zapp score and Pat Crane's legendary upside model and all these things. It's really shifting the landscape. So with all that said, it's incumbent upon us to look at like how else do we derive any sort of edge from this. We're mostly referring to 2019 here, Derek. You know, we want to be accurate about this, right? We're all back in the day of Mecole Hardman and Paris Campbell. So anyway, all that being said, what I'm trying to look at now is like outside these elite guys. It's like who in their profile analytically looking through, can I paint myself a picture of a guy who can sustain volume on NFL routes, right? So not just a bunch of Mickey Mouse routes and not just a bunch of field stretcher routes, but like who can actually gain volume consistently on deep intermediate looks. And that basically comes down to like, what's the signal in the analytical profile and what's the stylistic tendency of the player. And Ladd McConkey, despite never really being on the field because George is either up by a ton or he's hurt or they're just rotating guys for shits and giggles.
They have like so many 4-star and 5-star guys. They just need to get everybody on the field. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And Derek's already saying in the comments, his per route stuff, you know, vastly surpasses his overall analytical profile. So if you take the leap of faith into the per route numbers, and I think there's legitimate excuses for why that's the case. And you say, okay, this is a guy who can earn volume as an intermediate player, you know, as a 3-level scorer, I like to say, per route. It's a guy who can be efficient on that. And then you look stylistically at like, what are the film people saying? And I'm not a film expert at wide receiver, so I'm mostly looking at other people's work. And it's, you know, it's a guy that can separate. It's a guy, you look at like Matt Harmon stuff, that he's able to consistently win man and press, able to consistently win against zone. And it's like, okay, how can this guy align? Do we have routes issues? Well, he's probably not going to be an X receiver, but it seems as though based on his skill set, he can play slot or he can play flanker. And so hopefully that's a guy who can push for 90% route share. And based on all that, like, yeah, I'm actually pretty excited about this player. You might have known my wide receiver before, because I don't know who else I can say that about where I can picture like 24% targets per route run in the NFL, not on a 6A dot.
Is Brian Thomas the other guy that you're wrangling with there, or who would be the other wide receiver for?
I'm wrangling with Thomas. My issue with Thomas is we've never had 20% targets per route run in any season. His route tree is pretty defined right now in terms of like the slant, digs, and the go routes. And so the ceiling for that archetype, like unless he just really becomes a different player, feels like we're living in like the best case scenario is like a T Higgins, a DK Metcalf. I mean, that's a massive hit.
Right.
That's my preferred 100th percentile outcome, I guess is what I'm saying. And like, and if you're not that, you know, then we're living in like Mike Williams, Devontae Parker territory. So it's just a profile that's tough for me, but I do think he's going to get the draft capital. I don't even know if I consider him like a super risk reward profile as much as I think it's like he has a very clear defined NFL use case and role.
Yeah.
And he's going to need, I think, really favorable environment. And he's going to need a quarterback that's willing to throw into difficult areas, right? He's going to need a quarterback who's not a loser. Like he needs a quarterback who's willing to chuck balls down the field. Yep. And he's going to need also, I think, a really high volume passing attack, because I think he's not going to be able to draw volume that high per route. So he's going to need, you know, like the T Higgins situation where, okay, who cares if you only earn a target on 1 out of every 5 routes if there's 45 routes in a given game. So that's why I do with Thomas. And then the other guy that's still hanging around for me that I don't know what to do with is Worthy, because I mean, like two years ago, he's like easily my wide receiver 4, you know, pen down, close the book, hand in the test, because the profile is just there analytically. And I think the draft capital is going to be there too. But I have like legitimate concerns about like, if all he can do is run really fast down the field and do yak stuff, like, I don't know. I've been burned on that stylistic. That is the stylistic profile in which we've seen the most analytically inclined busts. So I'm concerned with him too.
Well, there's stuff with Worthy too that Brett Whitefield has talked about quite a bit, how, you know, he loses focus, like he can't track the ball very well for being a deep threat. Like Brett says that he's just absolutely horrendous at doing so, that he doesn't run strong through contact. His hands kind of become buttery when he gets around people, which would be very bad for an inline slot player. So it's the slot fade production that scares me off of him. I think I'm leaning Ladd at 4. But if you look at, say, Peter Schrager, NFL.com, 31 to San Francisco for Ladd, and all of a sudden I want to run into oncoming
I also
traffic.
had that in the much less populated Jacob Sanderson mock draft that was out on the PFF simulator. I also had that to San Francisco.
That would make me sad.
Kyle Shanahan to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, unless we get the Ayuk trade, right? That just would be very sad. Very, very, very sad for me for production. And that's my biggest issue with this whole draft class in and of itself. Like, all these guys can go to places that just make us hate ourselves. Neighbors to the Chargers to deal with Harbaugh running the ball.
You're
600
hating Neighbors on the Chargers. That is
600
way
and
too galaxy brain, dude.
650. I've watched Greg Roman run a high school passing offense for years.
You're not allowed to be upset about Malik Neighbors.
I will.
Justin Herbert. That is,
I don't care about Herbert. I care about Harbaugh running the ball 650 times. Blake Corum and Gus Edwards are going to hit 300 carries this year. I've watched Greg Roman, right? He gave me my gray hairs. I based my whole personality on watching Greg Roman use Patrick Ricard on go routes at the end of a game. You think it's going to change? No. I don't want that.
I would like Malik Neighbors to pair with Justin Herbert. That's fine.
Yeah, I don't want him. 2 years. You can get him 2 years later for cheaper.
400 pass attempts. That works.
Who do you like? Neighbors? Do you like Neighbors on the Giants or the Chargers?
I'd rather.
I like him more. Well, I like him more on the Chargers.
Yeah.
But the most mad that I've ever had people at me in, like, I don't know, years of doing this was when in a Discord I said that the Giants and the Cardinals were in the same tier of landing spot. And like I thought that I was going to be burned in effigy with people's upset. I actually think the Giants are like a pretty good, or like a sneaky good landing spot. They have no target competition. I think Dable's a pretty sharp schemer. Like, I think Daniel Jones sucks, but like,
right.
I just think I think if the Giants draft a guy, and whoever that is, a Dunze or Neighbors, I just think the entire offense is just going to be about them. Like the entire scheme of the offense is how do we get the ball, and especially with Neighbors, who's so dynamic after the catch, and you move them all around. Like, I think the whole offense just becomes the Malik Neighbors show, and he gets like 180 targets, and he's put in space in unique ways. I think it's fun. Nobody
survives Greg Roman. It's never happened. It just doesn't. It doesn't happen.
Personally scarred,
but it doesn't everywhere he's gone. Nobody.
Mark Andrews?
Nobody. Yeah, he's a tight end.
Yes,
Brock
he's
Bowers,
essentially a receiver.
Bowers, Chargers, all day. I would be so happy. So happy. Any wide receiver, burn him to the ground.
40 targets off of him 1 year, and he's just, he drops some footballs in Detroit.
You'll get him cheaper in 2 years after Greg Roman's run his value into the ground. It's gonna happen. But I agree that I like you can have terrible quarterback play and good wide receiver play. Justin Fields, DJ Moore is a prime example. Justin Fields was absolute dog water playing quarterback last year, and DJ Moore was dope because he was awesome. That's okay. I'd rather that connection than good quarterback, horrendous system, because we know through history that system matters more and more and more. I'm sorry, but miss me with the Greg Roman offense. I'm more inclined to think that the Chargers are trading down more than they are taking a wide receiver. That just seems against everything that they want to do.
I have in the Jacob Sanderson mock draft, trademark patent pending. I have them trading down as well, and I have them picking a wide receiver, but I have them picking Brian Thomas at 23.
Sure, I'd rather that so they don't ruin a truly elite wide receiver. They can find their new Jalen Guyton later in the first round. I don't care. I don't want it to be Neighbors in that role. I'm sorry. Terrible. Awful. No thank you.
How do you feel about how do you feel about Neighbors in the Chargers offense then?
Horrendous. Yeah. Look, I don't want to lose all of our audience just hearing. Look.
Oh, we already lost it.
Fans have gotten a break for 1 year not hearing me run rampant about Greg Roman. It's back. The Greg Roman segment is back as of next year. So everyone can look forward to that and unsubscribing. Scott's going to ask me why we're losing so many subscribers. It's just going to be a scrolling picture of Greg Roman coming across the screen. Ugh, I'm going to dye a goatee to just look just like him. Horrendous. Absolutely awful. But anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about your second round, because we said that this year it's tough. It is how are you parsing through the picks? Because like you said, there's nothing to really fall back on. Who's your favorite second round pick? Who's the second round pick that you see drafted far too often, too high at this point, in your opinion? Just some thoughts.
I would say my favorite second round pick, and maybe this is going to end up looking really bad, but are the two top running backs for me, Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. Like if either of those guys land pretty much anywhere in the second round, even if it's 201, I'm just like that auto pick. That's fine. I'm on that because I don't, as much as Troy Franklin has a strong profile analytically, I'm not quite sure in my heart of hearts can trust him. AD Mitchell, we've talked about a bunch, like just the scariest profile, even though I love what he does on tape. The two, like the quarterbacks, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, again, do not trust either of those guys, particularly at this point.
These guys are going in round one.
Per Jim Nagy, they are.
I bet today. I'll go against Jim here. I just put it down today, plus 145 on under 4.5 quarterbacks in the first round. I think it's a load of hooey, personally. These guys are older than me. They've been playing in college for so many years. We have injury concerns with Penix. We have Nix, who is in this. Like, what really makes Nix like fundamentally different from like Hendon Hooker or any of these other quarterbacks, where it's like they come out really old. They've been in this super pass happy, like very friendly scheme.
Yeah,
like they rack up a bunch of stats. Like I'm fine with these guys on day two. It's just I don't know. Like people see these guys and it's franchise starting quarterback. Like based on what for me, I really struggle to see these guys as round one picks.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why it's scary as hell to pick either of those guys. I've seen Michael Penix. I think Nix is generally going a little higher than Penix, at least in the drafts I've seen. And Penix has fallen sometimes to the third round because I think people are just really scared he's going to end up being like a fourth round pick, you know? And I think there's a world in which that's possible. It's probably not likely. But, and then, you know, so basically past Brooks and Benson, there's a bunch of receivers that I just don't feel strongly about. I've gotten Blake Corum a bunch in the middle of my second rounds. Just, I think in 3 or 4 leagues now, I've gotten Corum just because he's
going to be on the Chargers.
Yeah, the NFL is going to love this guy. He's probably going to get a good amount of volume. I think he's a good player. Maybe not like the most elite prospect in terms of his analytical profile, broken tackles, and all that, but I just feel like this is a player the NFL is going to like and give the ball to this guy. Ricky Pearsall has been a guy that I've been taking a lot just because
I love to hear.
Yeah, just because, you know, I think people are not quite sure what to make of him, and he's falling a little bit past some of these other guys. I think he's got the route running chops. Obviously, he has the athleticism. I think he has a higher floor than some of the other players in this area. And he, again, like you were talking about earlier, just like the style of receiver that he is, Trent tends to be, I think, or has a better chance of being sort of high volume versus a clear out like deep ball guy or whatever. And so he's another guy that I've gotten a lot of. And then the other, I think, player that I'm excited about getting anywhere in the second round really is, well, 2 of them, Audric Estime and Marshawn Lloyd. I think Lloyd is a little bit more scary, even though I think he might have a little bit higher ceiling. But because, you know, I think athletically, he's very fast, explosive, jump cuts, elusiveness, tackle breaking. You know, he's got the perfect size as a running back. He can catch the pass. He can catch passes, but this massive but, which is apparently like every single player in the second round and later, he fumbles the hell out of the ball all the time. So I'm like, he's the polar opposite of Blake Corum, where like coaches are going to trust this guy. I can see in a world Marshawn Lloyd just being in the doghouse immediately and never getting out of it kind of deal. And so he's a little bit scary, but I think he has a higher ceiling than a guy like Estime, who I think is another guy that is, you know, his floor is going to be early down banger. Like I think teams will like him because he breaks a lot of tackles. He has explosive play potential. If he can get into the passing game a little bit, kind of like a Leonard Fournette style where it's just a bunch of dump offs in his offense. But I think he could be a pretty high end fantasy guy in theory if he lands in the right situation.
Estime is one of so many running backs in this class that I like so much more in like a dynasty best ball league.
Yeah.
Where it's just like he's the guy where it's like, I know what you do and you do that really well. And how are you ever going to score 15 points per game in a season? Like, it's just like, it's tough to find the picture, but I like him. Like there's a set of running backs like him and Corum and Jalen Wright, who's nothing like those guys stylistically, but I think the end result is kind of similar in the sense like they're all guys who are like hashtag good at football.
Yeah.
But I don't know how like complete. And then on the other side, you have this other sphere of running back, and Lloyd is the poster child for where it's like, if you're good at football, you could be really good. Are you good at football?
Right.
I'm less certain. So
yeah,
different
100%.
question. I just think there's more role players in this draft that need a lot of things to happen for them to be legitimate producers, at least from what I can project and what we know at this point. So I'll pivot the conversation a little bit. I alluded to this before we went on the air. You know, every year in the social, it's just like, oh, you guys drafting these mid-tier rookies, just draft vets, hashtag score points, hashtag you can win too. The win too movement, as we'll call it. I feel more inclined this year to partake in the trading for receivers that are deemed gross, right? Because this time of year, veteran wide receivers have the plague. They have cooties. You can't have them on your roster. They'll just infect everyone with gray hairs and age and not fun. But I mean, the Amari Coopers, the Marquise Browns, the Calvin Ridleys, Deontay Johnsons, Keenan Allens, of the Chris Godwins of the world can be had for some of these second round picks.
Yep.
I'm way more inclined, if I'm a team that's a natural 208 in a start 10, to go and try to get some of these 12, 14 point per game producers, because I don't see it consistently at this point. So if the cost is minimal to do that, I think I'm just more inclined to do that rather than hoping and praying on some of these guys here. I'd like some thoughts on that. If somebody wants to expand or tear me down.
Who's the worst player you would trade like the 206 for?
Who's the worst player I would trade the 206 for?
Yeah, because the best player I would trade the 206 for is Patrick Mahomes. So who's the worst player you trade the 206 for?
I love that, you sly dog. No, if I'm going with the 206, I'm happy picking up the Deontay Johnsons, right? I'm happy picking up the David Montgomerys, Ramondre Stevensons, Marquise Browns, if possible. I'm just happy doing that.
Let me play a game. I'm going to Dynasty Data Lab. Okay.
Shout out Dynasty Data Lab, ADP, best ADP in the business, hands down.
Danny, you throw out while I pull this up. You throw out a pick, anywhere in the second round.
Okay.
And then we'll play a little would you rather here.
Okay, let's go 209.
Oh.
Okay. Here we go. The website's being a little slower to load than I was hoping for. Here we go.
Sounds like a skill issue.
There we go. Now we're good. 209. Okay. So all of these players are within one round either side of the 209. And we're just going to go round table. Quick yes, no. Okay. So would you rather have the 209 or Jahan Dotson?
209.
I'll take 209 there.
Yep.
Lucas?
Yep.
There we go. All right.
209.
Yeah. All right. 209. I'm in agreement. 209 or Austin Eckler?
Ooh, probably the 209, I think. I don't know. I think that's where it starts to get close, but 209.
I'm depressingly going with the 209, but it hurts to say that.
I'll go EK.
Okay.
Austin Eckler posted that off-season picture, got me all hot and bothered.
Yeah.
I'm going to do Austin Eckler for now.
I'm going to go 209 because the hat that Austin Eckler was wearing was very like dad mode, and it just didn't give off swag. So I'm going to actually take the 209 as Lucas reminded me of that dad hat that he was wearing.
Can I throw out a random one that I actually just did?
Please.
And you guys tell me if I got swindled. I traded the 209 for Geno Smith.
Oh, Geno.
Geno.
This is a pro Geno. You can
I'm like the biggest Geno stan. Probably on twitter.com.
Yeah, nice.
You can find my Geno Smith write-up.
Geno haters.
You can find my Geno Smith write-up at fantasypoints.com in my players that are undervalued in ADP, and it's King Geno. We stand Geno on this podcast.
Good to hear. Okay. Continue, Jacob.
209 or DeAndre Hopkins.
209.
209. I feel like some of these veterans are worth like early thirds. This is kind of like
I think he's being very specific. We are going to do.
I'm going everyone within one round of the 209. Don't blame me. Blame the ADP.
I'll take.
If you want someone younger though, if you want like a younger option, I mean,
that's fine. I don't have to choose. That's okay.
Oh, go for it, Tom.
I'll take 209.
All right. All right. Here's maybe an interesting one. Someone that maybe one of us on the show is kind of a truther for this guy. 209 or Dontavian Wicks.
Oh, see, I like Wicks. I'd like Wicks. Do I like him at 209? I like Wicks. I think he's better than Watson. Yeah, I'll take Wicks. I'll take my chance at Wicks.
209.
Same. 209. I feel like you could get him for a little cheaper.
I'm taking Wicks, but for the record, we started this off, Tom, where you were like, we need to make sure to sell these twos for these veterans, right? You're presented with two veterans. You're presented with Austin Eckler. You're presented with DeAndre Hopkins. Those are the two biggest veterans. You can also have Jacoby Myers if you want. He's in this group of people, veterans near the 209. And the only one we got you on was Dontavian Wicks. So
I will take
at heart.
I will take Demario,
but at heart you're also.
I'll take Demario Douglas. I'll take Curtis Samuel. I'll take Devin Singletary. I'll take Raheem Mostert. All guys that you just happen to glaze over that are also within that range. So I was prepared.
Curtis Samuel's like 2 rounds cheaper. Yeah, that'll come up.
209 is one singular round for what I'm looking at, sir.
I don't know.
On dynastydatalab.com. So
I don't know. Maybe I'm a couple days behind. Whatever I have.
Miss me. Try to catch me like that. You and your fraudulent questions. Right, but we can do the same thing with like 207 and 206, right? James Conner, Aaron Jones, Derek Carr.
Yeah, well, that's where it's interesting.
Yeah, the mid twos.
I have this line of running backs in my base 2 tier in my ranks where I have them all basically back to back. Henry, Kamara, Mixon, Jones, Pollard, Connor, Monty, and I have. I don't know. I might be missing count, but that's right around like the 205 range. And then like once I'm out of these running backs where I can picture like 14, 15 points for even if it's only for one season, if I can get that for one season, that seems reasonable enough on a contender. Once I'm past that group of running backs though, then I'm just like, screw it. Like, let me just take shots at all the rookies and have fun.
Yeah. The fun factor has to apply a little bit. Like everybody wants the mystery box, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it could be a boat.
Yeah. Well, it's just like you want, 14 and a half points per game from these second round running backs or Aaron Jones in Minnesota. Just take Aaron Jones. If that's what you're gunning for to like push your team to that next level, right? It's just a matter of team building. But I think, Danny, you're right. The fun factor, I want to be a part of the draft, et cetera, but you're allowed to win games. Like you don't have to be forever rebuilding, Lucas.
Right.
Like it's something we talk about all the time.
So fun.
Winning is fun, right? Like I like winning. Like every time I get to beat Jacob in a finals, I feel really, really good. and know that I get an ad read out of it. So like you want these things for your leagues. I just think it's important to note, right, that this is a year that if you wanted to just invest in veterans for your flex spots, this could be a year to do that. And then you also get this. This pick could be the next Puka from the 4th round to first round startup of 1 QBs. Yes. We've also talked on the show a lot about how people are just going to absolutely chase outliers like they're chasing the dragon on Main Street. Like it's not likely.
The point is, I think, still like directionally accurate in the sense of once you're out of the realm of where, like, okay, your win probability in any given dynasty is already so low.
Yes.
Most of that, like, ability to shift that win probability comes from your best couple of players. And then, once you've already taken out the best players on your team and you've already scaled down to the fact that your like base win probability is 8%, like even a 15 point per game player has like such a minimal impact on your win probability in a given year. Once you go below that, like once we're into like a 13 point per game player or 12 point per game player, it's so minuscule because that points above replacement is so negligible.
Yeah.
That like it's almost to the point where all player becomes worth is what you can trade them for in the future. And so like once you've crossed the Rubicon where like, yeah, it's like your 1% chance of Puka Nacua is like actually more valuable. So it's like it, like, and I don't know where exactly that line is. It's close. It's like Aaron Jones to me is on the right side of the Rubicon. Chuba Hubbard, I think he's crossed the Rubicon. Like I like DeAndre Hopkins we mentioned, right? Like
Singletary maybe, yeah.
Rubicon. Singletary. I don't know, right? So it's like it's not really a linear scale. It's almost like worth something, and then it's like worth nothing to the point where I'd rather just take a lottery ticket than have this person like clogging up space. So like, is the next Puka Nacua in this draft? I don't know, but like, I mean, almost every year there is someone, and usually multiple someones from the 3rd and the 4th rounds of drafts who via talent, circumstance, or the inefficiency of the human mind becomes worth a 1st round pick. And like I'm not saying like I can pick who those guys are, but I can have more darts, right? Like especially this year, we're going to get so much draft capital on so many wide receivers. Like we're probably going to be able to take wide receivers who were drafted in round 2 of the real life draft in round 3 of our rookie drafts this year. I would suspect. So like any opportunity to trade back and just pick up a 308 or a 309 and just get a free dart across your portfolio like it's worth something.
Yeah, Puka is like the big example that everyone's going to use, and of course, there's never probably going to be another. Well, there may be, but like, it's rare to see a guy like Puka who comes in and puts up ridiculous yards like he did. But I think last year in the 3rd round, you could have gotten Rashee Rice, you could have gotten Tank Dell. There's definitely guys that are like, the power up mushroom type players where it's like, whoa, really, this helps your team a lot. Obviously you have to hit those players, but I do like the idea of just kind of throwing the darts versus taking a guy who is not really going to move the needle a whole lot, probably, for the overall value of your team. So, I know that there's an element of mystery box. There's an element of gambling probably to it where you're probably not going to win, but it's still more fun to do it. But yeah, I like taking, dart throws on 3rd, 4th round guys a lot.
So I have Dynasty League Football's rookie ADP up right now, and just looking at with 24 being the cutoff going from 2nd to 3rd round, you currently have Ricky Pearsall sitting there, who I think will go up based off of draft capital. I think he's going to go higher than people are anticipating. You have Malachi Corley, who there's a hive that just absolutely loves Corley. I like him. I'm not quite willing to say that he's going to be the next Deebo Samuel, as some will do. Some in the hive will say that, which is wild. And then there's the 2 Jalens from Washington, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. I think both those have an excellent shot, and you're getting them deep in the 3rd round. Yep. And then if you want to go even crazier, you have Luke McCaffrey, who Some people are
Love
just
that.
going to draft because they see McCaffrey, but he's a solid player. And then Jermaine Burton, who was highly efficient, is JJ's breakout player or his sleeper pick that he's calling right now. And then, I mean, you have running backs all the way down into the deep 4th round, too, that you can be taking. There are a lot of players, the later you go in your drafts, that have in their range of outcomes, they can be somebody who's really contributing to your fantasy team, who's going to have a huge delta next season on what you could flip them for in terms of rookie draft capital. And there's enough of them that I can talk myself into that I'm going to be taking those picks way more than I'm going to be trading them off.
Danny,
I want
like
your
that.
take on the Washington guys. You're the local.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like one of them, but I won't tell you which one.
I'm guessing it's probably Jalen McMillan that you like.
Yeah.
I think analytically he's a little bit stronger. I like them both. I would pick Polk slightly above McMillan. But I don't have any problem with people going the other direction on it, just because I know McMillan. He outproduced Polk in 2022. You know, he kind of got hurt this year, and his production fell off. His playing time fell off just because of that. But I can see the arguments for both of them. I think Polk is. I mean, Peter Schrager put out a mock today that had Polk in the first round. I think the league likes this guy. I've seen. Jim Nagy was talking about this on Twitter. By the way, you want an edge, just go read Jim Nagy's replies to everybody, because he puts out little Easter eggs like all draft season. It's great.
And you can go and listen. He and Scott Barrett just sat down. You can find that over at the Fantasy Points YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, I try and consume pretty much everything he does, just because he's so good. He has the eye for he has an ear of the entire league. Like, he's talking to players, he's talking to coaches, he's talking to scouts, he's talking to GMs all year round. So he has, a pretty good, I think, grasp on like where players are going to go. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where it's, half the battle, I think, in rookie drafts is like finding the guys that are going to be day 1, day 2 picks. And so I saw Jim Nagy the other day say something about, it was just a response. It wasn't even like anything to do with Polk, but it was basically like Nagy said, yeah, I was sitting next to a bunch of league guys at the combine, and they were all talking like Polk is going to go way higher than people in I think the Twitter sphere think he's going to go. Not to say he's going to be a 1st round pick, but I think there's a pretty strong chance he'll be a 2nd round pick if he lands in a good situation. To me, he's just a very useful player. Good hands, good route runner, strong at the catch point, can pick up yards after the catch. He's a little bit like a Robert Woodsy, Jacoby Myers type player. I don't think he has a super high ceiling. But I think he's the type of player that could stick around in the league for a long time, just because he has a really well-rounded skill set. I think Jalen McMillan, I've seen a couple of people comp him to like Amon-Ra St. Brown analytically, which is really, really interesting. And, obviously I think he's more of a slot only type guy, but if he lands in the right situation where he's going to be a high volume pass catcher, he's another guy that can get yards after the catch. He's really tough. He has a big catch radius. He's got good size. He's got a good, good length, good speed. He tested, I think, better than people were expecting. So there's a lot of things to like there. I've gotten a lot of Polk. I've gotten a couple of McMillan in the 3rd round. The other guy I wanted to ask you guys about what your opinion is, because I think he's all over the place with a lot of people, is Roman Wilson from Michigan. Who, I think he's a tough one, because I've gotten him in a few places and I still don't really know what to think about that, like whether I should be excited or not. I think he's a guy, it's the same deal. It's like a Blake Corum situation. I think coaches are going to like him, and because he won't go out there and make mistakes. He, for Michigan, he was their touchdown scorer and 1st down scorer. Like 75% of his catches were either touchdowns or 1st downs. And I don't know if he can necessarily separate at a high level, but I think he's the type of player that a coach is going to like. So I'd love to get your guys' take on, what you think of Roman Wilson, what his value is, because I've gotten him anywhere from late 2nd to middle of the 3rd.
I saw Lucas fist pumping. So
I was going to say, I'm going to lead it to our Devy guy here, Lucas, who will know.
I mean, I really like Roman Wilson. He, like you said, he is extremely efficient, and that just draws your eyes to his analytical profile, even though the volume stats aren't there.
Right.
He is a good route runner. Whenever he got the opportunities, he showed out, and he's somebody who tested really, really well too. Doesn't have the elite size, but has good size. I'm curious where the NFL will end up putting him, but especially with where you can get him, I absolutely love picking him up everywhere. I still prefer both the Jalen's before Roman Wilson, but I really do like Roman Wilson. And I think that's also why I've been trying to target Jalen Polk and Jalen McMillan so much, is because of how awesome their ADP is. If people are going to be leaving them well into the third round, those are so easy picks. Just absolutely easy picks. And I mean, you can trade back from where you are in the second to get them. You can sell off somebody will probably believe in them for a third round pick. And it's good. I really like the back end of this draft. There are players that it's very easy to get excited about them because you're already going in and you've seen so many other players that are missing something from their profile, but you can still like them, just not like them at their ADP. And then you're running into very similar situations where all of these players at the back end, they're missing something from their profile, but there are still aspects of it that you can get excited about. You can talk yourself into what their ceilings can be. And I'm going to be hammering as many of them as I possibly can.
I have not been super into Wilson, and it's not really anything against him. It's more just like, I don't know. It feels like there's so many guys that there just becomes like a cluster of guys who are my guys, and then there's a cluster of guys who are not my guys. And I don't mean that as in that like they're not my guys and I hate them. It's just they're not my guys. Wilson's been like his analytical profile is fine. It's like doesn't really jump out that much to me from a lot of the other guys that are in the same group, like a Pearsall. Doesn't have quite the same ceiling season level as like a Xavier Legette, or even a McMillan, where that third year, especially next to Dunze, is really popping for me. And then I start to look, okay, well, what does the film community think? And the first thing I usually do when I'm thinking of wide receivers, I go over to Matt Harmon, see where he's ranking guys. And Wilson's scores are quite poor. I'm not going to spoil all the percentiles for people to go and read that. But I see that, and I'm like, I have an analytical profile I'm not super excited about. I have Matt Harmon telling me he's not separating very well. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to the next profile. And there's like 20 other profiles I can look to. So for me, like, who are the guys that are really grabbing my attention? It's Pearsall, it's McMillan, and it's Legette are probably the guys of that. Like, I don't know if I want to say third tier, but those are probably like the guys that I want to make sure that I'm like 20% plus exposure to in my like late twos and early threes right now.
Jacob, I'm a little surprised at Legette for you. Just the way that I've like looked at you monitoring players. I don't know, Legette just seems like the odd one out compared to most of the other profiles that you typically say are my guys. What is it about Legette that's really getting you?
I'll make the pitch for Legette. I mean, his floor is nothing to me, but if we're trying to hit on a ceiling profile, what I like about him is of all these sort of non-traditionally analytically strong profiles, at least he does have a season of really, really, really strong production. So unlike guys like, an Adonai Mitchell or Keon Coleman, where it's kind of like just a lot of this in the analytical profile, with Legette, it's a lot of nothing. And then it's a lot of, wow, like over 3 yards per route run, 24% targets per route run. Does it in an interesting way where he's not just a yak threat, but a really large yak threat, which is something that it's just a profile that I'm always very interested in. When you combine after the catch ability with size, now all of a sudden this is a guy who can not just be a screen merchant, but who you can build around on running the backside dig in these like play action concepts and get a rumble in, I'm not going to comp him to certain members of the 2019 draft class that I see him comp to, but you can picture him playing that type of role within the context of an offense, is where I end up. So what I like about it is like you get a ceiling of production, even if it comes way later than you want it to. And I like the physical aspect. I saw JJ give this talking point where, he was on the show a little while ago. He was talking about he has this new breakout metric where it's breakout score. And it's basically a combination of when did you break out and how much did you break out. So for a guy like Legette, where he breaks out very late, but it's a really, really epic breakout and comes in the SEC, his breakout score ends up being kind of okay. And you look at what's this combination of these old prospects that have a certain breakout score, and you get like pretty interesting guys. You get like Cooper Kupp pops up in this mix. You get Jaden Reed pops up in this mix. You get Legette. So we'll see on him, but he's a guy like if I'm just swinging for upside, he really interests me, and I think he's going to go round 2. And so I look at him versus Coleman and Mitchell and Thomas as like these sort of 4 guys where there's something. Well, and McConkey be another one in this group where it's like the draft capital projection is really strong and the analytical profile is really lacking. And what I like with Legette and what I like with McConkey compared to some of those other guys is at least I have a sample where I can say these guys were earning a lot of targets on their routes at some point. Maybe it wasn't enough routes. Maybe it was way too late in college, but there was a period of time in which they were earning a lot of targets on their routes. And so that's like my one little analytical like hat stand that I can hang my coat on and feel okay when I go to sleep at night.
Seeing Wilson for me is a lot like Khalil Shakir, right? I think he's just going to be a guy, same size, athletic is relatively similar, where he could end up going to a spot. And like you said, coaches are going to love him, right? He was a winner, real lunch pail guy. Like you said, produced right when he got opportunities, big touchdown guy this year. His quarterback is going to go right round 1, probably a lot higher than people think he deserves to go. And landing spot like everyone else. Look, you said he's going to be there are players that are slot primary. That's not a bad thing in fantasy anymore, right? The shift between how we look at slot wide receivers has completely shifted, where we almost kind of want these guys in PPR formats, right? That can give you 8 catches for 55 and 1 because it's just, that's big points. That's Chris Godwin level production. And we like that. So I think he's somebody that profiles in that Khalil Shakir, where the fantasy community is going to really love him and want to wait a couple years, even if it may never happen. Although Shakir this year might have a shot to do what we all want him to. But a coach's guy, right situation in a role that's trustworthy, right? We could get a Curtis Samuel, Shakir level out of him, and I could see that jumping his rookie ADP from that mid to late 3rd round, really creep into that 2nd round. So I like him, but I'm hesitant. He's not a guy I want to draft before the NFL draft.
Right.
Right. He's one of those potential, landmine on. Derek said the rise of 11 personnel and too high has made slot only not matter.
Well, I think I still think that I think slot only matters. Like if you can't surpass, well, it matters a lot if you're doing, especially if you're doing pre-rookie draft stuff, because now we're talking about certain landing spots in which it's a lot better than other landing spots.
Right.
I still think slot only matters. I think that slot primary is great. Like the Lad McConkey, Ricky Pearsall archetype of wide receiver is like my favorite archetype of wide receiver, where they're going to play slot probably 65% of the time, and they're going to play flanker in 2 wide receiver sets. I'm all about it. That just means we're getting like all of the high target per route opportunities, and we're still getting a really high percentage of routes.
Yeah.
So that pumps me up. I'm less excited if I think someone's slot only. I don't have enough of a refined Roman Wilson film take to like say whether I think he's slot only, but that would be like that's the big appeal to me of a Lad or a Pearsall, is you're running a way easier diet of, or I don't know if I should say easier. You're running a diet of routes in which it is typically easier to earn targets for fantasy purposes than like a Brian Thomas or an Adonai Mitchell, what they're dealing with. But you're also probably going to stay on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. And that to me is the jackpot.
Right. I think worry about that in the higher up picks in a rookie draft. Worry less about that when you get to the end. You end up with the JSN who, right, is running primary slot type stuff and gets taken off the field because he's got other receivers. You're really sad about that. You're a sad panda if you end up with that result and you drafted him at like 106. You're a very sad panda. But 3rd round and you're kind of hoping for some other stuff to progress. I feel really okay with that. So I think the shift. So you get Derek saying that it has made it not matter, and you're saying primary kind of doesn't matter, etc. I feel like that changes based on the on the price in which you're drafting and how much you're concerned about it. Is kind of how I look at it, if that makes sense. This has been phenomenal. We're going to take our last quick break, and before we can get Danny out and about for the rest of his evening and everyone else watching, shout out if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Of course, you want to go and do that to catch everything else that we're doing. Also, you're going to want to head in to the Fantasy Points Discord, where we have Dynasty exclusive content releasing more and more. I promised that the Dynasty product at fantasypoints.com is going to get a boost. It is happening this offseason. We are delivering. You're going to want to be there. You're not going to want to miss it. So our last break, I promise, and we are going to get some final thoughts, some favorite sleepers, etc. from everyone here before we lead into next week, where we have the guru on himself. As I mentioned, everyone loves like they're good. Look, I want to take this player every time in the second round. However, there are players that we don't ever want to draft at certain places. And I feel like we've been very kind to this draft class. I'm what might be known as a hater. So I want to know the players that you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole and what your threshold is for them. Because everyone is a buy to a price.
Right.
Me, Lucas and I went at this a lot. Coleman, not a guy I want to touch in the upper second round, not with a 50-foot pole. Is there someone that just has completely turned you off through this process? You don't want to go near them. And what is that price for you that you don't want to go near?
Great question. I think Coleman is a guy that I've been kind of scared off of. I mean, he just at price, just at cost, right? Like I've seen him falling towards the end of the second round, even in like maybe if he falls into the early part of the third round, I'll definitely take him there kind of deal. But
right,
it's scary to take him early on in the second. I would say the same thing for Jatavian Sanders at cost right now. For me, I just didn't really see it with him. I could end up being totally wrong. Maybe he'll land in a system where the quarterback loves throwing to a tight end and he'll be really productive. But I didn't particularly see a guy that like separates or runs after the catch very well. He's just kind of a guy. I don't really understand the hype around him. I like a couple of the other tight ends more. So he's not a guy I'm looking to draft in the second or early third round. If he's in their fourth round, maybe, but I say those are the two guys that really stand out to me. I don't know what to do with Braelon Allen, so I've just been staying away from him. I just don't know what to make of him. I think there's definitely flashes, but there's also a chance he just ends up being like a day 3 guy that never does anything. So I don't know. He's another guy that I've just been kind of gun shy about not taking. Those are the main ones that come to mind. What about you guys?
I mean, you hit 2 of them for me.
I've already talked a lot about my dislike of Braelon Allen, so I'm not going to do that one again.
4th show in a row.
Okay, I'll give. I'm torn on this.
Hot take.
In reality, I could end up taking anybody. But
Hop out.
Well, okay, so I've premised this whole draft season by saying that like it's getting hard for me to be out on anyone who has bad analytics because because everyone else is going to be out on them, so I'm probably more inclined to take them. So like Adney Mitchell's probably the guy I'm lowest on, but I could see a scenario where like he doesn't get a great landing spot and then people aren't as excited and I'm still like, oh, all right, well, he has great film, I'll take him. So I'm going to pick someone who has good analytics. I think the guy that I'm not going to take, because someone in my draft will always be willing to take him as they pull up their yards per route run chart, and that would be Troy Franklin for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
He fits he just hits all the marks of the strong analytical profiles I least trust, which is he put up a lot of numbers in kind of a gimmicky system with a lot of positive, supporting cast in terms of his coaching staff, in terms of Bo Nix, who, I just kind of mocked Bo Nix around one quarterback, but you could sure do a hell of a lot worse than Bo Nix as a college quarterback. And then the major issue with Franklin is I don't think he wins in a huge variety of ways. His profile is mostly coming from intermediate and deep completions. And he's this really weird prospect in that he basically played X wide receiver in college, stapled to the line of scrimmage at 6'2" and 130 pounds approximately. So he's not going to be doing that in the NFL. So he's going to have to learn an entirely new position in the NFL because I'm sorry, Troy, but 6'2", 173, you are not playing X wide receiver in the NFL. So he's going to have to probably be taken off the line of scrimmage. And then my question is like, okay, how great of a deep separator is he? Because we've seen this now with a couple of these other skinnier college players who won deep with Hyatt, with De'Ami Brown, where they go and test. And it's like, you're not actually that much of a burner. Like, you're fast. You run a 4.4. You're one of the fastest humans on earth. But in terms of NFL burner speed, you're not Jameson Williams, right? You're not Henry Ruggs. You're not Xavier Worthy. So I think a ton of his profile is dependent on deep separation as a 4.41 guy who has a 1.64 10-yard split, which is like actually slow. That's for the record, Troy Franklin's 10-yard split slower than David Bell's. Well, I think David Bell's still running his 40. So so in terms of a guy who's slow out of the break and is really skinny, he's going to have to move off the line of scrimmage, learn a new position, and then win in a way that's pretty narrow. I have a lot of concerns, and I think there'll be people in the draft that are more willing to just go with the production in a way that I don't know that he'll be able to replicate.
Yeah, that scares me because I agree. I see all that too, and it's like, oh, I did take him in a draft, and I'm like, kind of regretting it a little bit. I don't know if hopefully he lands in a good spot, but absolutely. I don't know what to do with him.
He could still totally hit, but Tom made me pick someone, so I had to pick.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
But Jacob, Devonta Smith, Tank Dell. They're
Whoa,
small.
where's that voice? I've never heard the Helium voice before. That was a cool trick.
Was that like a effect, or did you just do that?
Oh, I can't give away trade secrets, but to your point on these small guys and how they play.
You just do that?
Yeah, baby, we're in 2024. We can do whatever we want to. No, the voice of public opinion will tell you that to ignore size concerns playing outside with these outliers that are hitting is the point, right? So in the voice of public opinion, you're going to be wrong, but realistically, I agree with everything you're saying. So I think it's important. Helium mode. Fantastic. No, and I know we're just hurting Lucas's feelings, right? With Franklin and Coleman and all these guys. I know the Devi guys get really hurt when we start doing this. For me, it's Pearsall. It's Pearsall. No, thank you from me. He's not it for me. And I say it in the term like kind of how you did, where someone else is going to like him way more than me. Mm-hmm. Right? Like someone else is going to love him to a point where I'm going to be okay to pass, especially if he gets the nut spot in their opinion. So he's just somebody I'm going to avoid because I think their cost is not going to reflect what their actual value is going to be. I'm okay passing and missing potentially. And every time we mention another player, I know Lucas is just throwing up a little bit. He wants to quit the show. So you've rolled your eyes.
Every player. He's a lover.
He does. Well, he is. He's a Devi guy too. And they just have a hard time letting go and understanding Jerry Jeudy. So I'm not going to break your heart anymore, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to try to speak unkindly about the player you don't want to have.
All right. The person who scares me the most right now, it's not that I'm completely avoiding them, just they scare me the most. That's Brian Thomas Jr. That's the person who scares me. His archetype, I think, is extremely high risk. I think earlier in the year I said that he may never have a season that's above wide receiver 36, but he'll still win you like 3 weeks throughout the season just with what he'll do. I'm going off of that a little bit. I think that some point in time in his career, he will have a season above wide receiver 36. But I don't know, especially at 109, after coming off the first 8 picks, which seem extremely solid at this point, at least in terms of maintaining value through year one, it's just such a letdown to be sitting there. And I think part of it's expectations, part of it's archetype, and part of it's just that there's so many other wide receivers after him who have lower ADPs that I like just as much, if not more, at certain times. And so I'm just really staying away from him. If he were coming off the board as wide receiver 7 or 8, I'd probably like him a whole awful lot more, and I'd feel more comfortable about taking on that risk. But with where he is, it's turned me off. It scared me.
Yeah, him being drafted. I mean, we're looking at ADP with rookies included. He's being drafted right with like James Cook, Travis Kelce, Kirk Cousins. I'm just totally okay missing that and taking that. That's a classic. I'll take the veteran production type play. I completely agree with you. Look, we've gone an hour and 15. We've had a bunch of comments. We've had the voice of public opinion. We've played some games. We've got our hot takes. I think we've hit this. Look, we get to a point, and Danny, again, thank you so much for joining us. We get to a point in this process where I think everything's been said. I feel like for the most part, we've now picked this apart from top to bottom between whether it's articles, 672,421 podcasts, tweets, 500 different metrics and you name it. But do you have any final thoughts that you could share with us on this program before we get out of here about this class? Maybe whether it's the process or how you've gotten to where you've been.
No, I got nothing. That's it.
That's it.
I don't think I could add anything else. I think we've covered everything. Give me. This is a real life scenario that I'm staring down right now. What do you guys think of Tyrone Tracy? Is that just a pipe dream, or are you guys into it?
Oh, both.
When Jacob lights up like that, you can either get you can either get a 2-minute explanation, or we're gonna be here for another 20. So
it's a pipe dream, and I'm into it.
Yeah. This is a 4th round pick, so I'm just trying to decide whether I should do this or not. I just got I'm up on the clock as we speak.
Oh, so. live draft pick here on Dynasty Points.
Swing for the fence.
Untapped. Yeah. Do you like him more than say?
No, we lost Jacob again.
We lost him. Do you like him more than say like a Javon Baker?
I like Baker more personally, but that's because Derek Brown is swerving me on Baker every time he tweets about him more and more.
Well, I mean, Baker is like, I think Baker's better in like 90% of scenarios, because in 90% of scenarios, Tyrone Tracy plays like 0 NFL downs.
Right.
In the other 10% of scenarios, Tyrone Tracy is like legitimate starting fantasy player, and Javon Baker is like living in the Alec Pierce extended universe of
right.
He's going to get a target this week. So I don't know. I could see it going either way.
Yeah.
At a certain point, it's like, what are we doing down the wide receiver list? But
yeah,
Baker's probably like the right pick, but boring.
Gives me like Brian
right.
Edwards like hope, right? Like everyone just wants Brian Edwards to have been a thing. Like it gives me that kind of hope.
I mean, I used to be like, if this was me even 1 year ago, I would have been like Tracy, because like I've always been pretty uninterested in like bad wide receiver prospects, just because the barrier to fantasy value is so high at the position, whereas running backs can just fall ass backward into fantasy points on occasion.
Right.
Well, like, I don't know, call it PTSD, but like watching Puka Nacua and Rashee Rice and Tank Dell and like this like cadre of mediocre production profiles just take over the NFL last year is like made me a lot more sketched out on dismissing the potential untapped ceiling of Javon Baker.
Damn it. So that didn't help me at all. So now I'm gonna have to think a lot harder after this. All right.
I love that. Lucas, you have any final thoughts here?
No, the last segment made me sad, so I'm ready to go to bed.
All right, we've zapped the energy out of the always glowy and bright Lucas here. Jacob, final thoughts. What do you have for thinking about thinking?
Yeah, I was in Montreal last weekend, so I didn't write, but I did a little bit on the planes, and I will certainly have a big piece up at the end of this weekend going through. I did basically the first round of rookie drafts, and I'll go through the second round of rookie drafts and my thoughts on everybody, similar to the first piece that I did a couple weeks ago by the end of this weekend. So excited to have that up for people.
Love that. Man of the people. Even when you're on holidays, you're just continuously working around the clock. You were,
I don't know,
you are, as people say, built different.
I was working very little. I was eating a lot of smoked meat. I was
trying to
at
give you the
Noah
bump.
Kahan concert. It was incredible. Changed my life.
I love that for you. Love that for you. Of course, everything at Fantasy Points. Look, we had him on last week. I poked, I prodded for the entire offseason. Yards created finally makes its triumphant return. Graham Barfield once again doing the Lord's work, doing all the work that nobody else can just quite do at that level, giving you the information you need for these running backs, bad class or not. That drops tomorrow. So you're going to want to be at fantasypoints.com. You're going to want to sign up. You're going to want to get that. Nobody does a piece like this. It is truly unique. So you're going to want to do that. Of course, Best Ball Breakdown returns this week. Fantasy Points getting back into the best ball streets. Not going to want to miss that either. Again, the Discord, the place to be. I know we had some questions in here. Look, sometimes we just can't get to them, but you know what you can do? You can get into the Discord in the Dynasty channel, ask away. We will be there for you all the time. Doesn't matter what time, I'll be there. I have no life. This is just what I do now. So of course you're going to want to do that. Remember to hit like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell us what kind of shirt you're wearing. Doesn't matter what you say. Just let us know that you are here. Helps us with the algorithm. Helps us do more shows like this for you. We love and appreciate all of you. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose in your best days. They're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.